Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. The time has come, all you minties. That's right, the reading orders are back on Near Mint Condition. I am the Uncanny Omar, and today we are kicking off the year with the entire X-Men Krakoa reading order. Whew, so let's go ahead and get this party started. And welcome back, everybody. Back by popular demand are the reading orders. And before I even get started, this looks like a lot of books. And it is a lot of books. We are talking about 5 years worth of X-Men in every single bit. The crossovers, the events, and of course the ongoing series. But what I always like to remind everybody about specific eras is you don't have to get everything. Find the character that you end up loving and follow it, follow the teams, follow the creative teams, or follow the storylines, or the events. If you're an event person, I have several of my viewers that only like reading big events, and I'm going to be talking about what those events are on this video. But this video is just for the people that want absolutely everything and how to best read it in collected editions format, because it can get a little crazy towards the end. And the second thing I want to say is, you're probably asking, is it already in reading order up there? No, absolutely not. This is not in reading order. I just thought it looked aesthetically pleasing. If you want written documentation, that can be found on our Patreon. And that starts at $1 a month. And the link to our Patreon is in the description of the video. Now, it took me a long time to come back to reading orders because they take a lot of work. There's a lot of rereading, a lot of writing the documentation now that people want written documentation. So a big shout out to my wonderful partner in crime, Dom of X, who is helping me. So the reading orders are going to be back, and you can vote on the next reading order on our Patreon as well. All right, so what we're going to be doing today is looking at the reading order in collected edition. And the best way to collect everything is in the trade paperback format. Now, I've gone over the anthology series. Unfortunately, the anthology series were discontinued. But if you want to follow the anthology series into the trade paperbacks, I am going to make that easier. You can find, after Trials of X-12, Sabretooth the Adversary, X-Men by Jerry Duggan Volume 2, and Marauders by Steve Orlando Volume 1. And just follow the guide after that when I'm talking about the books in reading order. And the last thing I want to say is that if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I love giving things away. I have giveaways all the time, so I've given away some of these trade paperbacks, but I do have them in other formats, whether they are in oversized hardcover format or in omnibus format. One way or another, I am going to be talking about the trade, so even though I'm showing you the omnibus or the OHC, I will pop up the trade paperback cover that you need with the information. And the information is going to be on the actual video. So please smash that like button before we get started. It goes a long way for us here on the channel. Very small thing you can do, but it means the world to us. All right, let's kick off this reading order with the very first book you should read that kicked off the entire era, House and Powers of X. All right, we are going to go ahead and fly through these. This isn't like your normal overview. So this is the stories collected in here that kick off the Krakoa era. This is the intertwining series that laid the foundation for what will be why the X-Men and all mutant kind are living in Krakoa. There are a few retcons in here. And I think they're beautifully and respectfully done retcons. There's several timelines. You can get confusing at first, but I promise by the middle of it, you're going to have a better understanding as to why the X-Men are living in Krakoa and what it means to be a mutant and how different this era is than any other era of X-Men. Now, the biggest question, of course, I get is it a good jumping on point for new readers? Absolutely. This is the era that got a lot of my friends into X-Men. As a matter of fact, my wonderful partner in crime, Dom of X, got into comics because of this very comic collection here. Is it a jumping on point? Yes, that's exactly what it is. It is a new status quo for the X-Men. If you've been reading X-Men for 40 years, this is great. If you've been reading X-Men for 10 years, 20 years, great jumping on point. And you haven't read X-Men in the last 30 years, even better. Come on in. Or if you're just new to comics, it's a phenomenal way to start the new status quo, laying the foundation of this new era, plus laying the laws down of what can and cannot be done in Krakoa. But that is the House and Powers of X. X-Men by Jonathan Hickman, Volume 1. This is the one, I'm so used to doing that in overviews, so I'm just going to start flipping here. This is following the new X-Men. This is your new team, so it's the Summers family as they explore this new island of Krakoa. Krakoa, of course, has been an enemy of the X-Men, and from time to time, you know, like in Wolverine and the X-Men, Krakoa has been part of the X-Men, but never have they lived on Krakoa. So these are one-offs and setups, and we have an introduction of new characters like the Summoner. There's the traveling back to the Savage Land, and then, of course, what Professor X, Magneto, and Apocalypse forming this new government. It makes for an interesting political view on the X-Men, but this is setting up, like I said, the Summers team. And then, of course, in the 5th issue, it's the setup of Mystique wanting her wife back. Now, this is the Giant-Size X-Men by Jonathan Hickman. This is a series of one-offs, but they're all interconnected. They're connected by one storyline. Storm is the one that kind of ties it in together, but it's really the story of Phantom X, Storm, Jean, and Emma, and of course, Nightcrawler and Magneto having their one-off issues. There's a wonderful issue here that's the Nuff Said sort of homage issue to the Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison era. Nightcrawler goes on his own adventure with Cypher and Magic to go back to the Xavier School to see if there's any mutants left behind, and then Magneto is a setup for the greater world stage of the Krakoa. And then, of course, you've got Phantom X doing all... Like, this issue made me such a fan of Phantom X, and I know a lot of people love Phantom X from the Grant Morrison run, but I just thought he was too mysterious and not enough evolved about him. But Uncanny X-Force in this totally drew me into being a fan of his. Now, we're going to jump into another series. This is New Mutants by Jonathan Hickman, Volume 1. And this is one that has weird mapping. It's got issues 1 and 2, 5 and 7. But this is the story of the classic New Mutants roster reuniting. And it's a fun Shi'ar space story. And it sets up X-Men 8 and 9, which is why I'm required to read it here, or I guess suggest to read it here. You also have characters like Mondo joining the team, and if you're a fan of the Imperial Guard, this is a huge Imperial Guard issue, and maybe some hints as to what Jonathan Hickman's next story is called Imperial, especially with that vision of Sunspot, huh? For those of you that remember. All right, we have a continuation of those episodic one-offs with X-Men by Jonathan Hickman, Volume 2, and those episodic one-offs are now taking us to the Shi'ar storyline. There's the continuation of that New Mutant story from Volume 1, and those can be found in issues 8 and 9 in here, and it ties into the Empire storyline for the last 2 issues that are collected in this trade paperback. And the Empire, of course, was this big event that's happening at Marvel, but we're not quite there. We're not quite reading that event yet. Because the next place we're going to go is Excalibur by Tini Howard, Volume 1 and 2. Gave those away. Actually, I think my brother ended up with those 2. These 2 trade paperbacks collect the first 12 issues. This is where the portal opens in Otherworld. So now we're involving Krakoa, Earth, and Otherworld. And Otherworld is, of course, the basis of the Captain Britain Corps. And all of these wacky characters from Captain Britain and Excalibur. The original Excalibur by Chris Claremont and Alan Davis. And a lot of them you're going to be seeing a return of. But the teams are basically Rogue, Gambit, Jubilee, Richter, and Apocalypse, all being led by Betsy Braddock. Now, Betsy Braddock is finally separated from Quanon, so she is going as the new Captain Britain. And you have a lot of, like I mentioned, characters coming back from the old school days of Captain Britain and the old school days of Excalibur. Now that is, of course, the setup to the first volume. Now let's talk about volume 2 that is collected in here. We do have the Warwolves. Remember when I said that a lot of characters were coming back from classic Excalibur? That's right, we have the Warwolves in here. We have the Starlight Citadel. Jamie Braddock comes back. He's got this pocket reality of other Captain Britain cores. And then we have the Externals making an appearance, if you remember those characters. So even if you've been away from X-Men for a long time, and like say you haven't read since the 90s, you know who the Externals are because you were reading X-Men, right? You were reading about Gideon and those characters. Yes, they all make a return here, including Saturnine and how it all ties together. Again, those are the 2 separate trade paperbacks. As a matter of fact, the next book we're going to be talking about reading are Marauders Volumes 1 and 2. Now, these are Marauders by Jerry Duggan. Marauders, of course, have a history with the X-Men. They were the villains that massacred the Morlocks in the Morlock tunnels, led by, of course, Scalp Hunter, now going as Grey Crow, and perhaps he has something to do with this, but also Mr. Sinister pulling those strings. And Sinister plays a huge part in all of Krakoa. We've yet to talk about him. But this is a group of pirates, quote unquote, led by Kitty Pryde, or Kate Pryde. Sorry, now she is now going as Kate Pryde, not Kitty. And of course, you have Bishop, Storm, Iceman, and Pyro. They use the black market to trade Krakoan pharmaceuticals to the rest of the world under the rug with funding from the Hellfire Trading Company. No longer the Hellfire Club, but now it's been restructured by Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw. And for some reason that they later find out, Kate can't go through the portals. So in order to get to Krakoa, they have these seeds that they grow, and it creates portals all over the world. So any mutant, and only mutants, can go through. For some reason, Kate can't go through. So that's what's going on in the first 6 issues. And then the mystery deepens a little bit in the next volume with volume 2. This is where Callisto ends up joining the team. We need a little drama, so one of the team members ends up dying. Now, dying, of course, in Krakoa is a lot different than it used to be. Remember those laws and rules I talked about that they set up in House and Powers of X? That's right, you're going to learn about the resurrection protocols and who the 5 are. The 5, like, people that you wouldn't even think are the strongest members of mutant kind. It just kind of blows you away. There's a Yellow Jacket versus Bishop and Pyro issue in here. Pyro is actually crushing on Jean, of course, who isn't at that time. And then, of course, the Marauders and Emma Frost against this new group of villains that are showing up in Russia. You have Tempo that ends up joining the team. And then, of course, the ramifications of that death I talked about. And those are the first 2 volumes of Marauders. Let's move on to New Mutants by Ed Brisson, Volume 1. So remember when I said the first book had weird mapping by Jonathan Hickman? Well, this is where you're going to find the missing issues, 3 and 4, 6 and 8 through 12. So instead of focusing on the original core group of New Mutants, you have Armor, Glob, Boom Boom, Maxime, and Manon from X-Force end up joining to bring mutants living on Earth to Krakoa, all done in separate missions. Angel, Salvadori, and Beak's family are recruited home, and those can be found in the second arc of this trade paperback. There is even a Nova Roma adventure here with Magma. They end up, there's this trippy rescue mission that is also set in Russia, and that guest stars one of the Mutant Liberation Fronts, and then Glob. There's like a Glob introspective issue here in the final part of this trade paperback. Now, this is the only New Mutants that Ed Brisson wrote, and that was the only New Mutants that Jonathan Hickman wrote. Again, that Jonathan Hickman stuff, with the exception of New Mutants, can be found in that omnibus, too, the X-Men by Jonathan Hickman, which takes us to X-Force by Benjamin Percy, Volume 1. Now, this is your CIA Krakoan operative team that operates as a special ops undercover and intelligent unit that has Jean Grey, Sage, oh, love that girl, Beast. They're the ones that are operating the hive mind, but it's really Colossus, Wolverine, and of course this is classic Wolverine, Logan, not Laura Wolverine as she's going through as during this time, Black Tom Cassidy, and Kid Omega, and they are the Muscle. We are introduced to the Peacock Man, at the end of issue 1 is what could have happened to Professor X. And that kind of sets up the whole mystery for the first story arc of the trade paperback. That somebody perhaps has killed Professor X, but remember we have resurrection protocol, so what does that mean? So let's move on to X-Force by Benjamin Percy Volume 2. This is Domino's all-out luck storyline in the first 2-parters here, and the return to Terra. Now, we have Joshua Cassara doing a lot of the artwork with Jan Bazaldua doing some of the artwork here too, but all of this written by Benjamin Percy. We return to Terra Verde in the second story arc in here, and then we have the return of a Rasputin. Nope, not the one you're thinking of. Mikhail Rasputin, that's right, Colossus's brother makes a return here. That changes this story arc for a long time. All right, we talked about Betsy Braddock as Captain Britain, and she's separated from Quanon. So if you want to follow Quanon as Psylocke, she's back here in Fallen Angels by Brian Hill. This is drawn by Szymon Kudranski. This is all 6 issues. It was only 6 issues. So all of it is collected in here. It's never been collected in oversized format. So this does consist of Psylocke and X-23, who will later be calling herself Wolverine, young Cable during this time, Captain Britain showing up, Mr. Sinister, and Magneto. Now, this is the time to place Cable from Brizen's extermination in X-Force. But you don't have to worry about reading those, unless you want to, of course, because Brian Hill does a phenomenal job of reintroducing the character and catching you up to speed with what he's been up to. And eventually what this will do is lead up to Hellions, because in Hellions, one particular issue, something important happens with the character of Psylocke that doesn't get answered in this miniseries. Now, let's go to Wolverine, the best there is at what he does. This is a really interesting collection. So this is the first 5 issues. This is, again, written by Benjamin Percy. You have Adam Kubert drawing some of it, like the A story in issue 1 and issues 2 and 3. And then you have this awesome artist, Viktor Bogdanovic, drawing 1B and 4 through 5. So there's 2 plot threads going on. First of all, Logan is dealing with the return of Omega Red and the reclamations with his family. Of course, you've got Decan, Laura, but also Gabby. And then the next story arc in here is fighting the Vampire Nation. Those are the ones that are drawn by Viktor Bogdanovic. And you have 2 different stories in here, but it does tie everything together. So let's move on to, whoa, Deadpool by Kelly Thompson. This one doesn't look like a Krakoa book. Not really. It's not 100% necessary, but I wanted to add it here. This is Deadpool by Kelly Thompson. Chris Bachalo drawing some of the stories in here, Gerardo Sandoval. And it is the King of Staten Island. He becomes the King of Monsters. It's got issues in here of Elsa Bloodstone and Captain America versus Deadpool. And then, of course, there is an issue in here that I wanted to talk about, and that is because Jeff the Landshark ends up visiting Krakoa. So it does have a little bit of ties to Krakoa. Not as much as the next book, which is X-Men Fantastic Four 4X. This is the one by Chip Zdarsky and Terry Dodson. It's all 4 issues. It was a miniseries. And it is dealing with Franklin's invitation to Krakoa and the response to it by the Fantastic Four, which we saw a little bit of a hint of in the X-Men Volume 1. So that's why I wanted to put it here, because I think this is important to read. Now, of course, there's some Doctor Doom in here, and later on there's a little bit of a retcon in Dan Slott's run, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about this. So let's move on to the next big thing, and that can be found in Empire X-Men. So this is the event I'm talking about. Do you need to read the whole Marvel event? No, not really. Empire is the return of the Katati, and how it deals with Krakoa. Remember, Krakoa is an island, so it's a lot of plant-based. We got the plant-based portals. So in this omnibus is the Empire X-Men 1 through 4 miniseries, which you can find on its own. It's a trade paperback, and it is how the X-Men are dealing with these plants. This story right here. You have Jonathan Hickman writing some of it, Tini Howard, Leah Williams, Jerry Duggan, and then, of course, artists like Lucas Wernick and Andrea Brocardo. And you are introduced to a group of badass old ladies, too. So you can find that in a trade paperback, or if you want the entire event, there is an omnibus. I hinted at it a little bit earlier, but here we are with Hellions by Zeb Wells, Volume 1. So written by Zeb Wells, Steven Segovia drawing these issues. And these, along with most of them, with the exception of Fallen Angels, are available in oversized hardcover. This one actually is complete in an oversized hardcover, not quite an omnibus. This is the penalties for those who break the laws. They've established laws in the House and Powers of X trade paperback. And this is what happens when some of those mutants end up breaking the law. And one of them is Havoc, who's first to go on this suicide mission that is led by none other than Mr. Sinister. I said Grey Crow would be back. Used to be called Scalp Hunter. Now he goes by his name. You also have Quanon, Psylocke here, Wild Child, Empath, Nanny, and Orphan Maker make an amazing duo. This is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite comic book. I know I never really, when I do overviews or reading orders, I try not to give my 2 cents. This is freaking hilarious for anybody that has read it, whether you're a fan of X-Men or not. However, I will say if you're not a fan of Kieran Gillen, Sassy Sinister, that's the kind of Sinister we use here. He's got a lot more layers than the Sinister that you saw, like and I love Claremont's Sinister, but just the way he's written is so different. Oh man, I love this series. And of course, Sinister will play a huge part later on. So, we talked about this young man right here, Cable by Jerry Duggan, Volume 1. A coming-of-age story of a time-displaced Nathan Summers, and him just growing into adulthood, to the man he would become. Drawn by Phil Noto, and this is a wonderful series. This has the first story arc in here, where he's trying to find these missing mutant babies. And you've got guest stars in here, like Pixie and Armor, Curse and Fauna, Silver, Samurai, and Wolverine. But really what this is a sneaky Summers family book. He goes on a date with some of the Cuckoo Sisters, and even the Knights of Galador make an appearance. Yes, that's right! The Space Knights of Galador make an appearance through here. But that's what the first 4 issues are about. Which takes us to X Factor by Leah Williams, Volume 1. We've talked a little bit about the Resurrection Protocols and the laws. This book deals with the Resurrection Protocols going a little haywire at times. This is drawn by David Baldeón, and it features the characters of Rachel Summers, Polaris, Prodigy, Eye-Boy, North Star, Aurora, just to name a few. Also, Deken makes an appearance through here. And what they're trying to do is trying to fix the broken pieces of this Resurrection Protocol that's gone haywire. There is a murder through here, and then of course we have the involvement of the Mojo-verse. And this issues in here, read 1 through 3. Don't read issue 5, because 5 is a fallout of X of Swords. So that means that I think this is one of the few times I'm going to say stop reading it in issue 3, after issue 3, and go to the official first Krakoan crossover, X of Swords. This other island has been set up in the pages of X-Men. This is Magistrix Opal Luna Saturnine, speaks of a tournament between both the Krakoa Island and the Aroko Island. And we haven't really met a lot of those characters outside of the ones that have shown up in the pages of X-Men. So Jonathan Hickman, Teenie Howard writes their stories in here. Jerry Duggan writes his stories in here. Benjamin Percy, Vita Ayala, Zeb Wells, Leah Williams, and Ed Brisson. You have the wonderful artwork in here of Leno Francis Yu, Pepe Larraz, and other creators like Victor Bogdanove and Stefano Caselli, Mahmoud Asrar. A lot of these names are kind of blowing up these days. But this is the first crossover, and certain rules are, again, broken, right? Because that's what rules are made for. X of Swords is really 10 of Swords, right? So there's 10 swords, and each of these mutants picked from Krakoa has to fight their counterpart picked in Arako. But not every tournament is about a sword. Sometimes it's weird types of tournaments between 2 mutants, and it becomes really weird and interesting. But that is your very, very first X-Men Krakoa crossover, like official one that happened. All right, here we have X-Men by Jonathan Hickman, Volume 3. This is the X of Swords fallout with the 2 islands and the council. We are back in space with the Shi'ar. So there's a Scott, Jean, and Aurora along with Roberto, Sam, and AC. And we do have the return, or rather the Children of the Vault storyline that kind of sets up some of the future stories. And then, of course, a familiar character that is awakened in this final issue that will change Krakoa again. Now, Vulcan is still out there. You know, he's still part of the Summers family during this time. But not in this volume. Wolverine by Benjamin Percy Volume 2. You still have both of the artists working on two different stories. This is the return of not only Maverick, but you also get the return of Team X. And then, of course, the continuation of the Jeff Bannister and Dolores Ramirez plot threads from the previous volume. We do even have a freaking patch adventure in Madripoor, if you were a fan of that era. So this is an era that's really for everybody, new readers and old readers alike. And I don't know, I think at first I was like, I don't know about this vampire thing, but the way that it is tied into the rest of the story, by the way, Scott Eaton's supplying some of the artwork here too, it makes it for a really fun Wolverine story. And speaking of fun, here is the Hellions X of Swords Fallout. And this is a real deep look at Mr. Sinister, what he's doing behind the scenes, what exactly he has planned, and why he's acting like a victim. We have the return of Cameron Hodge here. We also have another character that I just never grown attached to, and that is Arcade making a return here. This actually has in the final issue a tie-in to the Hellfire Gala, which is sort of your big next event for the X-Men, but we'll talk about that soon, because we got lots of books to talk about. While not necessarily a Krakoa book, I think this is one that's really important to read because the character of Kane Marco appears later on, and this is a redemption story for Kane Marco. We have this new character named D-Cell who aided him in apprehending the Hulk. So Kane is now in trial for his past crimes. This is written by Fabian Nicieza, teaming up with Ron Garney, who's no stranger to drawing mutants. Although is Kane Marco a mutant? Well, you know the answer to that and why he wasn't invited to Krakoa. But it does mean something else for the future of Juggernaut. And we bid farewell to one of my favorite series. This is Hellions by Zeb Wells Volume 3. Now you have Rojo Antonio and Z. Carlos helping Steven Segovia. So now you have two Sinisters that are left over from the X of Swords. You have the Locust Vial storyline wrapping up in here from X of Swords. And then the team ends up, disbanding as sorts. Like, oh man, you've got this amazing issue in here with the Orphan Maker. And then, of course, what will happen later on in something that will be known as the Destiny of X era. So this is saying goodbye to this team. I remember talking to Zeb Wells at a convention, and I was like, oh, why did you wrap it up? It was so fun. He's like, well, when you're given the chance to write Spider-Man, I understand. But man, this was such a great fun Krakoa book. All right, but where do we go next? We go to X Factor, where we're going to see some familiar faces again. This time around, Siren, where she just keeps dying. But remember, resurrection protocols, iBoy's powers are really taken to the next level in here. And then we have this whole relationship between Aurora and Decan, and how Northstar feels all about that. We've got Dazzler and Shatterstar at a concert in here. And then the final issue that's collected in here has a big tie-in to the Hellfire Gala, which I don't want to reveal yet, but there is a reason why we have a trial soon. Now we have Sword. And this is by Al Ewing. So Al Ewing starts writing X-Men comics. Man, do I love that guy. Immortal Hulk, USA Avengers, The Ultimates. Very underrated writer, but I think people now know his name, and that's wonderful. So this is a relaunch of Abigail Brand's Station after the events of Ten of Swords. It's an intergalactic adventure that features Abigail Brand facing some of the characters from the mutant world. You're going to have WizKid in here. You got Magneto showing up through here. Al Ewing's joined by a lot of different artists through here. You got Valerio Schitti and Bernard Chang, Nico Leon that are helping out. There's a Manifold story in here that kind of helps with the history of his ties with the Avengers. And then, of course, being a mutant, you've got characters like Fabian Cortez and how he is at odds, of course, and always will be with the character of Magneto. And there's even a King in Black tie-in during this time. So we do have a King in Black event. And I think that's one of the biggest questions about King in Black. Do you have to have read King in Black to enjoy all of this? Not really. You just have to have a basic understanding, because the next book we're going to be talking about is The Marauders, Volume 3. And this has ties to the King in Black, but it's like King in Black Marauders. So it's just small ties, like, you know, you have this god of the symbiotes coming to Earth, and that's it. If you want to, I guess, here, I'll show you an image. You can read the King in Black storyline if you want to get into the symbiotes and Spider-Man world, but it's not necessary. This is, oh man, Kate beating the crap out of Sebastian Shaw, and then you have this match between the Morlocks, Storm, and Callisto. Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. And then the Marauders are dealing with the King in Black, like I mentioned. You have Pyro and Iceman returning to Madripoor. And then there's a dinner issue that is led by Storm, getting ready for this Hellfire Gala that I keep talking about. But not before we talk about one character in here. Again, Benjamin Percy's X-Force, Volume 3. This is when Hank, the character of the Beast, starts going dark. So the team ends up interrogating Omega Red. There's a cameo from the Marauders from issue number 15 in here. So I told you to read that. But this is really cool because this shows the parts of Krakoa that nobody else is showing, like the dark and the underlayer of what's going on in Krakoa. Black Tom Cassidy playing a big part in that. Jean does end up leaving the team after what ends up happening in these issues collected in this book. And there is a two-parter that ties in heavily with the Hellfire Gala. And eventually Deadpool will end up crashing this Hellfire Gala party, but not officially joining them. Well, maybe. All right. Children of the Atom by Vita Ayala. This was a miniseries. This is an interesting miniseries because this was written before Krakoa. It wasn't supposed to take place during Krakoa. But you have these 5 teenagers. You've got Cyclops Last, Daycrawler, Gimmick, Marble Guy, and Cherub, who idolize the X-Men and try to protect our world. But they're also dealing with the effects of the Camelot Law from Outlawed. And that's all told in the pages of Miss Marvel, who will come to play here in a little bit. But that storyline is all about how there's no teenage superheroes. So they're captured by the Human, who have made a return here, and then the final issue in here even has ties to this Hellfire Gala I keep talking about, so what the heck? And those issues are not in the Hellfire Gala red carpet hardcover, by the way. Alright, so what is this Hellfire Gala? Well, it's dinner invitation only. Everyone dresses up for this big special night. This is where Hickman says goodbye to the regular X-Men title, so he'll be doing another one of these crossovers here in a little bit. This plays heavily into the character of Moira McTaggart in the past, who, if you've been reading these and following the adventures of Krakoa, she plays a huge part, and this shows a little bit more about her past. There's a couple little things here that are taking place in the past, basically with Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw. But the most important thing about this is from this moment on, people are voting for the next X-Men team. The next X-Men team are going to get voted and chosen by the end of this book. And there's some gorgeous designs in here by Russell Dauterman. So this is all written by Jerry Duggan, Jonathan Hickman, and Al Ewing. And it's got Russell Dauterman artwork, Nick Rigoda, Sarah Pichelli, Lucas Wernick. And it takes place in all of those issues of Marauders and X-Men and Planet-Size X-Men. Alright, the next set of books, which is really New Mutants by Vita Ayala Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and New Mutants Volume 4, which is not by Vita Ayala, but we'll come back to that really quick. Let's glance at these while we show you what's exactly collected in them. So the roster goes up against Wild Hunt and Amal Farouk. So, of course, the Shadow King making a return here, and this is Daniel Moonstar and Karma facing against each other in this Crucible storyline. And Mirage is lost in Otherworld while the character of the Shadow King is manipulating Wolfsbane to end up joining him. And of course, magic playing a big part in all of this, which takes us to... This is one long story, by the way. Even though New Mutants by Vita Ayala Volume 2 here has a Hellfire Gala tie-in. There is a death in this issue, and it stirs up a lot of questions about clones and their souls and what exactly it means to be a clone. And more of these New Mutants, and not New Mutants, older mutants, I guess, are joining the Shadow King. So we've got things going on the moon and the Summers house, and there is a showdown between the Shadow King and the New Mutants eventually, and there are callbacks to the Demon Bear saga eventually in this book right here. And the final issue is rebuilding the issue with the rest of the team. Now we're into New Mutants by Vita Ayala Volume 3. Magic is now in limbo, but she plays a bigger and more important role in limbo. Madeline Pryor hasn't been seen since the pages of the Hellions, but who exactly is she? Is she really the Red Queen? Is she the Goblin Queen? Or is she the Sorcerer Supreme of Limbo? This is a huge fight between Magic and the character of Madeline Pryor. Rod Reyes supplying the artwork like he did in the previous volumes, but one of my favorite penciler from the 90s coming back, and that is Jan Duursema drawing the last couple of issues through here. Now, this takes us to volume 4, because Vida Ayala had wrapped up a lot of their work, even though Vida writes issue number 30 in here, but we've got Alyssa Wong writing stories in here, Charlie Jane Anders, and Danny Lore writing stories in here with artwork from Guillermo Sana, Jason Liu, Emma Kubert, Justin Mason, just to name a few. This one here really feels like an anthology-like trade paperback. Each issue is separate from the other one, the previous one. Like, the first story is by Danny Lore. It features the Ken, Gabby, and Warpath. We see issue number 30, a goodbye from Vida Ayala. And then this does feel like it leads into the Lethal Legion, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So this is the final issue of the ongoing New Mutant series, but let's keep going with another ongoing series, and that is X-Force Volume 4. It is X-Force versus Manslaughter, this new character by Benjamin Percy, in the pages of Weapon Plus. If you've read those, there's a fight here between Mikkel and the Beast and Colossus, and installing these nesting dolls in the lagoons of Krakoa. Joshua Cassara, Martin Kokolo supplying the artwork for these. We gotta fly through here now. All right, Excalibur Volume 3. This is the fallout of X of Swords, but I want you to read Volume 3 and 4 here. Now we've got a new status quo for Betsy Braddock. So Betsy is back in this volume right here, but she has a new status quo, as I mentioned. Betsy and Quanon end up discussing their complete separations in here, and then Malice begins her work against Captain Britain. There is a Hellfire Gala in here that focuses on Richter, but you can read the Hellfire Gala before reading this volume right now. Then we get Excalibur by Tini Howard Volume 4. This is a return to Otherworld, a mix-up with Doctor Doom's return to Avalon in here. The piece of Otherworld is completely lost. Then we have this King Arthur versus Captain Britain fight, and of course there has to be a sacrifice. Now, this is the finale in here, but this will lead into a relaunch into another series, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Marcos Toe's artwork throughout this entirety of this book, or this series, it's just amazing, by the way. So let's wrap up Cable by Jerry Duggan. More mutant babies are missing, and perhaps there is a solution to this, and then Domino and Cable are back together, but is it old Cable or is it young Cable? And Nathan ends up going on a date with Esme in Limbo, and here we have Hope making a return, but she's not the only one that makes a return, because there's somebody else important that makes a return through these pages that you'll see in the next few story arcs. Why is Magneto at trial? Well, because something huge happened in the pages of the Hellfire Gala that leads X-Factor into investigating what Magneto could have done. And is it possible for Magneto to have done this? Leah Williams pretty much taking X-Factor and the X-Factor team to writing these stories, with Lucas Wernick and David Messina on artwork. But this is the trial of Magneto and whether he is found guilty or innocent. Now, Scarlet Witch is one of the series I don't think you need to read, but everybody should be reading, or Steve Orlando's phenomenal Scarlet Witch. But you can start reading it after the trial of Magneto. Back to Sword by Al Ewing. This is the morning, another aftermath after the Hellfire Gala. This ties into The Last Annihilation, which is a Guardians of the Galaxy crossover by Al Ewing, which is another underrated series. It involves Victor Von Doom making a deal with Storm in here. There is a betrayal in the Sword Station, and then we see the return of Cable playing a big part, but this is older Cable playing a big part in this Last Annihilation crossover. Now, the series does come to an end, but again, will be relaunched as a new series, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we get Classic Cable, and Classic Cable shows up in here, in that Cable Reloaded series, with bigger guns than you thought he had. Way of X. Now we welcome Cy Spurrier into the mix. This is drawn by Bob Quinn. Nightcrawler and the Academy X Kids figure out the cracks and crevices to Krakoa's codified law, culture, and society in here. There's a return of a character named Legion that you may be familiar with, but there's a bigger return later on. There is a way that they could start making more mutants, and should they actually dip their toes into that? But yes, there is a return of a character that I did not see coming. This is a mini-series that will lead into another series, and we'll talk about that series here in a little bit. But yeah, that villain took me by surprise. X-Corp by Tini Howard, Volume 1. Well, if you ever wanted to know how the funding of Krakoa worked, look no further than X-Corp. This is Penance and Archangel Multiple Man go to the corporate world with X-Corp, making dealings with several corporations, and there's espionage and drama, and Mastermind actually being thrown into the mix of this story. So yes, if you want to see how the funding is working for Krakoa, how they're able to afford all these things, maybe selling a little bit here and there of that Shi'ar technology that they probably shouldn't be, this is the book you've been looking for. And it is a mini-series that is all collected in here. Then we say goodbye to the Marauders. Now, this is the final issue by Jerry Duggan. Klaus Janson drawing some of the story in here, Ivan Fiorelli, and Matteo Loli. But this is Tempo and the crew facing some of the problems that they're dealing with in Ireland here. They end up getting thrown into space, so there's a little bit of sword in here. And then there's a fight of a big character, not a big name character, but a literal big character against Kate Pryde. We will see if these characters will come back to Krakoa in one way or another. So while Jonathan Hickman left the X-Men books, Jerry Duggan takes over as the new X-Men writer with a new team and a new series, kicking it off with issues 1 through 6 in this trade paperback. This is the team that was voted in of Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Polaris, Synch, Wolverine, and Sunfire and Rogue, to fight and save the world, including this ridiculous fight, and it's Laura Wolverine, by the way, where they form a giant robot in the first issue. Hell yes. This trade paperback also involves the High Evolutionary, there's a Nightmare issue, and then Orchis, who we've been quiet for a little bit since House and Powers of X start making their return. We saw a little bit of Nimrod, but now Orchis making a big power play here towards the end of this book. Jonathan Hickman says goodbye to the world that he helped create. This is Inferno by Jonathan Hickman, not to be confused with the original Inferno by, of course, Chris Claremont and Louis Simonson. Valerio Schetti drawing some of this, and Stefano Caselli and R.B. Silva. This is, look at that homage to House and Powers of X. Already nostalgic over that. But this showcases exactly the evil of one of these characters, and there is no going back from this. Moira McTaggart learns the secrets of what's really been going on in Krakoa. She left some rules for Charles and Magneto to follow, and they did not follow it. So what does it mean? Well, it means hell is about to break loose in Krakoa, and a lot of the strings that are being pulled, you're going to see who the puppeteer is and what exactly is going on and how the council is forever changing. They've lost some members, so they have to vote some new members in. Orchis making bigger and bigger changes here. There are some moments in here that, like I said, there is no going back from some of these moments. So some of these attacks, some of these fights are going to change Krakoa and the mutants forever. Wolverine by Benjamin Percy, Volume 3. Adam Kubert's still drawing some of this, but now we got Lan Medina and Paco Diaz drawing some of it. This is Wolverine versus Solem from X of Swords, so it's that rematch. And then we have the return of his buddy, maybe not, Agent Bannister, making a return. We'll see if they're friends or not. And then a whale. And that's all I will say about that. Moving on to Wolverine by Benjamin Percy, Volume 4. This is one that guest stars the Mark with a Mouth, Deadpool. And it also has the Wolverine versus the Hellbride. It has tie-ins to the Axe Judgment Day. So guess what? We're going to be talking about that here in a little bit, because that is an important story. And again, all written by Benjamin Percy. And we do have the Deadpool during this time again. Why I asked you, or suggested reading the Deadpool by Kelly Thompson, because the status quo has him be the king of Staten Island. Then we have the return of Danger, one of the characters from Astonishing X-Men. All right, so this is a character we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about Apocalypse, we've talked about Magneto, we've talked about Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw, like all these characters. But what happened to Sabretooth? Well, something happened to Sabretooth in the pages of House and Powers of X. They made an example out of him when he was banished to Krakoa, but not where all the mutants are living in this wonderful heaven on earth type of place, but the pits, due to his crimes against humanity. So this is where what is in the pit? What is he finding in the pit? This is when it gets really interesting, and it starts setting up the events that will happen later on. This is Victor Lavalle and drawn by Leonard Kirk. And the follow-up series to this is Sabretooth and the Exiles. This is Sabretooth making some friends when he was in the pit, like Oya and Melter, amongst other folks that you probably are familiar with if you've been reading X-Men for a while, or if you've just been reading the Krakoa era. This is what happens when him and his crew start off with this revenge plot and coming back into Krakoa, and what that means for all these characters. You're going to see Toad in here, who we haven't seen Toad in a while, and you will find out what these characters did to be thrown into the pit. Now, we're not done with talking about Wolverine, because the next book is another one of the event books, but it's not an event crossover. This is the 10 Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine. So this is about time travel, and it is a time shred that is happening to Logan, and he's trying to figure out the true nature of this one character that we think is completely lost. And it is a follow-up to Inferno, written by Benjamin Percy, Joshua Cassara, drawing a lot of this, and Federico Vincentini. It is less of a Wolverine story, even though Wolverine plays a big, huge part in this, and more of a Krakoa story. So that's why I said it's an event. I think a lot of people just think, oh, it's a Wolverine thing. No, that's more like the Sabretooth War. The Sabretooth War is definitely a Wolverine event. This is a Krakoa event, even though it primarily focuses on the character of Wolverine. Now, we talked about the Resurrection Protocols, and I think one of the biggest series that deals heavy with that is none other than Immortal X-Men by Kieran Gillen. Kieran Gillen making a return to X-Men, one of the most underrated, Uncanny Immortal Talk Pretty One Day, underrated writers. So he returns to the world of X-Men by writing about the Quiet Council, and it's spinning out of Inferno, so we have throwbacks to some of the stories that he wrote in the past, specifically Mr. Sinister and the Destiny's Diary, as they're able to predict what the world is going to bring to Krakoa, why that world is now being judged, and what it means. Lucas Wernick helping out with this book right here. And oh my gosh, this is another one of those series that, I think everybody should have been reading, along with X-Men Red. So now that Sword is over, the series is over, now we turn it to an Arakko book, and it's led by Storm and Sunspot and Magneto. So this is where Vulcan plots are coming to fruition from the pages of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men early on, and then the Ring of Arakko and what they continue to focus on. This has another one of those Judgment Day kind of tie-ins rather, featuring the character of Cable. Stefano Caselli drawing some of this, with Hung Cabal drawing one particular issue. But it is X-Men, and it is called Red, because they're hanging out on a different planet now. Spurrier continuing his X-Men story in From Way of X, but this time around in a new ongoing series called Legion of X. Man, we've got some big-time writers. We've got Kieran Gillen, we got Al Ewing, and now Cy Spurrier. Really like all three of those guys. This is The Krakoan Laws Requires Justice. So this is a book that focuses heavily on Nightcrawler. And remember that Juggernaut story I told you to read? Well, there was a reason for that. So Juggernaut playing a big part in this, Pixie playing a big part of this, so very underrated characters, and Legion coming from the pages of Way of X. So I had to talk about Legion a little bit. That's not much of a spoiler. I mean, that happens in the first issue. But they have this new villain that will play a huge part for the rest of Krakoa, and that is Mother Righteous, and the ties that she may have to a certain sinister character. John Basaldua doing the artwork here. Teenie Howard gets to continue her Arthurian legend type of story with Bob Quinn here, and that is Merlin and King Arthur are now in control of the Citadel, and Captain Britain and the 10 Knights are up against them. So this sets up another storyline that is taking place in Otherworld, and we have characters like Megan and Kaloon and Shatterstar joining the fight. Now, this was a miniseries that leads into another miniseries, and we'll talk a little bit about that miniseries later on, but this is the 5-issue miniseries. While Jerry Duggan is off writing X-Men, we have Steve Orlando stepping in to write Marauders. So this is the new Marauders series, and this is still pirates, but this is pirates in space being led by Kate Pryde. This time around, she's got Bishop, Decan, Aurora, Psylocke, and somebody else that I kind of don't want to spoil, because I want people to be surprised as to what they're dealing with and who they're taking with them. But this was a this was a fun series that Steve Orlando was tapping into older stories. So if you're a fan of older stories that didn't really get resolved, that took place with the Shi'ar Empire and the X-Men, This is the one. Devil's Reign X-Men can be found in a trade paperback, but I have it collected in this omnibus format. Devil's Reign is, of course, the story of the Kingpin versus all these straight-level characters. But the X-Men deal with this storyline that's going on in their own way. So this has the Devil's Reign X-Men 1 through 3, and it focuses heavily on the character of Emma Frost and what she did in her past. The X-Men story is the one that focuses on the character of Emma and approaching New York in her own way. Like I mentioned, no stone left unturned. So we go back to X-Men by Jerry Duggan. So there's a new character that has appeared. It is the character of Captain Krakoa. There is another character that is Dr. Stasis that will play a big part too, but we don't know the identity of Captain Krakoa. Is it a new mutant or is it somebody else? And now we still see Orchis dealing and playing behind the scenes, getting ready for something huge. And that something huge is about to happen in one of the Hellfire Galas, but not necessarily the next one. And again, you have the Quiet Council here, Laura Wolverine, you have this fight against Lady Deathstrike with her, and then you have the game world playing a part in this. This is also the last of Pepe Larraz's interiors that we're going to see during the Krakoa era of X-Men. So we have Javier Pina doing some of the artwork now, which takes us to the X-Men Hellfire Gala. This is a story that features a kidnapping of Mary Jane by one of these new villains that I don't want to reveal that happens in the Free Comic Book Day. It is the second annual Hellfire Gala. The losers of the first election are thrown into an adventure in a Shi'ar space opera type of story to protect Deathbird, and then the losers of the second election are also thrown into an adventure against the Typhoid group, the X-Men. I think that's found in the pages of X-Men Unlimited Infinity comic that was never really truly collected in trade paperback. So Mary Jane has this throwdown with the X-Men villain here. And of course, Spider-Man will be showing up. So it's still that party, and it is still deciding on who the X-Men are going to be. And that is the second Hellfire Gala. Now, there are two trade paperbacks that came out. There's Axe Judgment Day and Axe Judgment Day Companion. But this is very important to read because this is a huge crossover that is led by Kieran Gillen. Him and Azad Ribich's Eternals were kind of building pretty much the template for what this crossover was going to be between the Avengers, between the Eternals, and between the X-Men. So it is literally a Celestial coming down and judging mutant kind because of what they found out in Krakoa. Again, the main event taking place in the Axe Judgment Day trade paperback, but I have the omnibus, so that's why I'm showing you here. So of course there's this fight and who's going to be on whose side, and the Judgment Day Companion has like the one-shots, the Death to the Mutants 1 through 3, the Eve of Judgment storyline. But the omnibus has everything. X-Men Red by Al Ewing, Stefano Caselli drawing this. This is a very important tie-in to the Judgment Day, and it was also collected in the Judgment Day book, but just issue number 6. This is pretty much what is going on with one particular character that gets judged. You have an adventure of Cable through here. You have the shattering of Iska via the Year of Storm, and then you have a little bit of the Legion of X storyline through here. You have the return of Vulcan, who we haven't seen for a while, and just him dealing with the rest of the Summers family. And of course, the meetings between the Shi'ar Empire and Abigail Brand playing chess through. Look at that, is so badass. Stefano Caselli and Jacopo Camagni are the artists through here. So another one of the tie-ins here. This is Jerry Duggan's volume 3 of X-Men. CF Villa now drawing it with Joshua Cassara. And the X-Men are being judged. Marvel Girl, Cyclops, Firestar, which of course she was elected in the Hellfire Gala, Havoc, Magic, Sync, Iceman, Forge, all of them being judged by this being. And then of course we have the return of the Vault. So it's a return of the Children of the Vault that was set up by not only Jonathan Hickman, but going back all the way to Mike Carey's X-Men Legacy. Oh, that stuff is so good. And then, of course, we have this annual that's collected in here that reflects on Firestar Angela joining the X-Men. X-Force by Benjamin Percy, Volume 5. We have a new villain that shows up through here, Cerebrax, or Cerebrax, I guess, against all of X-Force. And then we have Kraven beginning to hunt for X as the Judgment Day crossover happens through here. And then Deadpool finally making it official, joining the team, perhaps, in this volume. All right. Forget all the seriousness that's going on. Forget mutants being judged. If you want to have just some fun with Laura, Wolverine, Dazzler, Jubilee, and Boom Boom, this is it. This is all of these X-ladies just having some fun. Leah Williams and Carlos Gomez working on this book, just going for a night out, and then getting caught up in some troubles that will involve the grandson of Dracula, Alex. So nothing big happens in this, but it's just a break from the norm and a break from all the seriousness, from the deaths and the judgment that are going on. Speaking of fun, ridiculous stories, Dark Web, the crossover with Spider-Man. We've got clones. We've got Madeline Pryor. We've got Ben Reilly. Madeline Pryor, of course, the Goblin Queen. Ben Reilly now going as Chasm. They're gonna wreak havoc on New York City because they feel like they have been betrayed by their loved ones. So both of them are teaming up together to bring hell on earth on New York City, and the X-Men are, of course, involved in here. There is an omnibus of this coming out this year, but the trade paperback has the X-Men stories in there, and X-Men do play a big part in this. Immortal X-Men by Kieran Gillen, Volume 2. This is the Judgment of Nightcrawler. There is a throwback story in here. There's a nice noir issue in here that features Destiny and Mystique, and then we finally get some revelations of Mr. Sinister and what exactly he is doing. What is he building? What is he planting in some of these resurrected mutants? Some hints as to what's to come. Deadpool by Alyssa Wong. So this is Deadpool outside of Krakoa a little bit, but I mean, even the trade dress is very Krakoa-ish. Auditioning for an assassin group. They're known as the Atelier to kill off none other than Doc Ock in the first trade paperback. This run is kicked off with the Beast story of New Mutants number 30. So that's why it's part of like Vita Ayala's New Mutants storyline. That was their last issue on New Mutants. Martin Kokolo supplying a lot of the artwork in here with Jeff Shaw doing the New Mutants story. Now, I not only think it's good to read New Mutants or Deadpool Volume 1 in here, but go ahead and read Deadpool Volume 2. You want to see Deadpool with a giant symbiote puppy red here? Yeah, that's what this is about. So this is more hijinks, and it wraps up a lot of the plots that were started by Alyssa Wong, and also the relationship between Deadpool and this young girl and what she means to him. You'll have appearances in here from Deadpool's characters in the past, not only just Cable, but perhaps other important people that have played a huge role in Deadpool's life. Again, not necessary for Krakoa, but fun nonetheless, just like the next two books. Captain Marvel by Kelly Thompson, Volume 9, Revenge of the Brood, Part 1. So we're going to be talking about the last two volumes of Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel is now joined by Gambit, Psylocke, Laura, Polaris, Hazmat, and Spider-Woman as the Brood are attacking. So this sets up the events in the Duggan series, and there is a Judgment Day tie-in with the first volume. So the X-Men show up in the later half, and then things start getting wrapped up in this book right here, where Captain Marvel is set out to find Rogue and save Binary. But if Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, was Binary, and she's Captain Marvel now, who could be this new Binary? So this is where the X-Men end up leaving a mark on the Brood Hive like they've never done before. Andre DeVito, Sergio Davila, David Lopez are some of the artists working with Kelly Thompson. This will be collected in Volume 2 of the Omnibus, but that we still don't have a date for that yet. Wolverine by Benjamin Percy, Volume 5. This is the Beast Agenda. It begins to come to fruition. Wolverine is thrown into the pit, that pit where Sabretooth and the Exiles were, while the rest of the team are dealing with these new demon hordes and going on different missions. And what exactly is Beast planning here? Juan Jose Rip is the artist during this time. Now, Volume 6. So, Wolverine by Benjamin Percy, Volume 6, a trade paperback. I don't know where it went. I think I loaned it to somebody or must have given it away. But I do have it in hardcover. But Volume 6 collects issues 31 through 36. And it features the Beast. A lot of Beast. Whether it's the clones of Beast, whether it's Hank McCoy, or is it the Dark Beast, as a lot of people have been thinking, because there's a lot of things that Hank has been doing that doesn't feel like something Hank would do. But that's what ends up happening through these pages of Volume 6. It's not the only Volume 6 we're talking about, because believe it or not, Wolverine by Percy and X-Force by Percy were the two books that kind of continue without getting rebooted. So this is where Maverick ends up joining the X-Force as they go against the Araki pirate Sever Blackmore in a fight for Arako. So this takes the X-Force group up to space. And it is interesting to read this back and forth between Wolverine just to see the connections, because it is the same writer. But that's why I kind of separate them by story. Like, read this and then read volume 7, because jumping back and forth can get a little irritating. Robert Gill and Paul Davidson drawing some of this in here with Chris Allen. And this now shows what Peter Rasputin and Laura Kinney have been doing while the other X-Men are in space. So this is the fight with X-Force, with Omega Red, Deadpool, and Domino. Now, the Marauders weren't left out of the judgment. This wraps up Steve Orlando's run on the Marauders, but who will end up escaping? And this is where Orchis gets a chance to slip in as the Marauders are thrown into this huge fight. And they get thrown into a time warp. So they end up, not the dance, they end up going to Earth 2099. So there's some returning characters that, like I said, Steve Orlando really digs deep into these obscure X-Men eras. And you're going to be seeing a lot of returning characters in this volume that we haven't seen in years. I don't think anybody really cared about these characters. You have Andre Brocardo and Valentina Pinti as some of the artists in here. It also collects the X-Men Before the Fall Mutant First Strike. X-Men by Jerry Duggan Volume 4. What do I mean by Before the Fall? What's around the corner? Oh, come on. If there's a rise, there has to be a fall, right? If there's a dawn, there has to be a sunset. Anyway, what the hell was I saying? The Lord of the Brood forces the current X-Men team to be thrown in deep space. So it has ties a little bit to that Captain Marvel story, which I told you to read. So the status quo is set up by the Kelly Thompson's Captain Marvel run. And then Orchis starts making some new machineries. And we have the return of Pog Urpog in here, who will play a big part in the next story arcs to come. And this is where it gets interesting, because I am throwing in the Invincible Iron Man in the reading order of Krakoa. I think this is very important. This is volume 1. This is Jerry Duggan writing this, but he's also writing what? X-Men. Tony Stark is back in business, but not in a great way. He's lost his money, his company, and he's been drinking again. So now Fei Long and the X-Men are thrown to his dismay, and Emma Frost ends up joining Tony for a sit-down. And is it a professional sit-down, or is it something romantically that can lead into something else? Juan Figuetti and Andre DeVito are the artists in this book, and this is the first trade of Iron Man by Jerry Duggan. Bishop War College. So we've explored outer space, we've explored possible timelines with Wolverine and the lives and death, but this is a team of X-Men that are all black. This is an alternate dimension where Bishop is the outsider, and he's landed in this version of Krakoa where characters like Armor and Surge and Cam Long and Aurora Charles are. So it's a different universe where Bishop is appearing here, and how does he end up making it back? This is by Jay Holtman and Sean Damian Hill, the two creators that worked on this book, and this is Bishop War College, and it fits into the Krakoa reading order. So where has Betsy Braddock been? So Teenie Howard returns back to, I think, Teenie's favorite character, and that is Betsy. Betsy Braddock is now part of the Braddock Manor. It's been reestablished as the 10 Knights have, let's just say, dealt with the problem in Otherworld. And Betsy Braddock can now be free to do whatever she wants to. And one of the things that she wants to do is further explore her relationship to one of her old teammates. I don't want to spoil who that is. Vasco Georgiev is the artist here. So Captain Britain, is she still Captain Britain? Or is Betsy another superhero going by a different name? And of course, what does it mean once you're Captain Britain? That mean always Captain Britain? Rogue and Gambit, Power Play. This is written by Stephanie Phillips, and Carlos Gomez is the artist here. So remember when I talked about the Books of Destiny, and Destiny, of course, Mystique playing a huge part in all of this with Moira McTaggart. But what happens once the prophecies by Destiny start affecting Rogue and also Remy LeBeau? So they decide to take themselves to Vegas to overturn the Destiny's warnings, and they will run into all sorts of obstacles because it's never easy for the X-Men just to get away for the weekend. We explore the past and the present, and of course the future of these two characters. Alright, Sinister finally playing his ace up his sleeve. And this is a freaking wild ride. This is available in a trade paperback, also with that same cover, but I have the oversized hardcover here, collecting the exact same material. Everything is Sinister, building upon the concepts of powers of X. This is set 10, 100, and 1,000 years into the future. So you're going to be seeing Kieran Gillen, Al Ewing, and Cy Spurrier working together, telling different stories of the experimentations that Sinister has been doing. And who are some of these characters that have been appearing through here? And what does it have to do with anything, the Legion of the Night, perhaps? You thought the House and Powers of X was confusing. This gets crazy, and it's just a freaking blast to read. You have Lucas Wernick, David Lopez, Travel Foreman, Jeff Shaw drawing some of these issues, and we start seeing who Sinister really is and what exactly he's been putting into these resurrected bodies. We see some returning characters, too, that we haven't seen since House and Powers of X. Legion of X by Cy Spurrier, Volume 2. So, what the heck is going on with Banshee? Why does Banshee have a flaming skull? Oh, well, that all happened a little bit earlier, and this is the ramifications of that. Angel is turned into a monster. Black Knight is thrown into this chaos right here. And also starts seeing the changes in some of the characters. Legion having to deal with his father through these pages. Rafael Tim Pimentel and Nitho Diaz are the artists here, as well as Phil Noto that wraps up this series. Immortal X-Men Volume 3. So this is in the fallout of the sins of Sinister. We have now 4 of these maybe Sinister clones that are out here. This again written by Gillen, Lucas Wernick, and Paco Medina working on this book. So each one of them coming with a little different symbol on their forehead. And who exactly are these 4 Sinisters and who is the real Sinister? Oh, this gets nuts. X-Men Red by Al Ewing Volume 3. So what happens when Storm finally finds love and it's not Forge, it's not T'Challa, it's somebody else that you didn't expect? Man, Storm and MJ just going for 2 different dudes that just kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't see that coming. Charles Xavier is back in this book, dealing with something that happened to one of his fallen soldiers, one of his friends. We have the White Sword, the Omega Araki healer here. And then, of course, more of the fate of Arakko and what's going on Mars. And Apocalypse making a huge stand. Actually, Apocalypse playing a huge part in this for the remaining of the series. I mentioned MJ for a reason. You're damn right. We're talking about The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, Dead Language Part 2. But why? Well, something happens towards the end here. It has an issue that will lead into a book that I'm going to be talking about here in a little bit. And it is the Fallen Friend comic that a lot of people didn't see coming, including myself when it was out there. But yeah, that got spoiled for a lot of us, but yes, it's collected in this book, and there's a reason why I brought this book up. We haven't talked about New Mutants in a long time. Well, that's because Charlie Jane Anders starts writing the Lethal Legion in here. This is sort of like Escape from the New Mutants, but it is those characters of Wolfsbane and Danielle Moonstar and Karma fighting against Count Nefaria, and it has ties to the coming of the fall. So it's before and right before the fall. And I'm talking about the Fall of X. That all kicks off with this Fall of X Hellfire Gala. This is the 3rd and final Krakoan Hellfire Gala. We have a new Captain Krakoa showing up here. We have perhaps the death of an X-Man. A new X-Men is voted in, and that is none other than Juggernaut. Oh yeah! But does it last long? And Iron Man making a return here, but what exactly is Iron Man doing in these pages? What does it have to do with Emma Frost? This is written by Jerry Duggan. It's also Steve Fox writing these issues with Adam Kubert, Luana Vecchio, and Valerio Schetti drawing some of the artwork. And it is the beginning of the fall of Krakoa. This is where it begins. This is where Orcus makes its move. Jerry Duggan's X-Men Volume 5. This is where Kate devolves into Shadowcat after the fall, after the huge thing that happened in the Hellfire Gala. And Juggernaut ends up joining the X-Men officially to battle against Doom. And then what is going on with Tony and Emma? Well, that is going on, or going to lead into a storyline in the pages of Iron Man, which, like I said, it's very important to read Iron Man. because that is also written by Duggan. And we do have Orchis still trying to destroy all of mutant kind, leading into Immortal X-Men by Kieran Gillen, Volume 4. So Sebastian Shaw getting a little bit of the profit from the tragedy that happened in the Hellfire Gala. Xavier ends up making a decision for the mutants here. And then something's going on with Jean Grey. Something that happened in Orchis. Something that's going on underneath Muir Island. Exodus still leading some of his people to a new promised land. And Apocalypse playing a huge part in all of this. Lucas Wernick and Paco Medina are now the main artists on Immortal X-Men. Everyone, and I mean all of the titles, are dealing with the fall of X because of that Hellfire Gala. This is where Genesis declares war on Arakko, and Iskad the Unbeaten maybe returns through these pages. Al Ewing and Yildiray Sinar working together on this book that is led by Storm, but other characters appear through these pages. So if you were a fan of the X of Swords, Al Ewing brings in a lot of those characters from Arakko over to Mars. And how long will they be there? And what could it mean for Apocalypse? And then Storm's love life. Oh, everything is falling apart. But not before we get a Bobby Drake-centric series. So Bobby Drake is back after the Hellfire Gala's unfortunate end, and he ends up facing elements of doom and chemical criminals that will put him... Wait, what the hell was I saying? Oh, this is a story that focuses primarily on Bobby Drake and just being in exile. You know, he's kind of hiding away from Orchis as all the other characters are either trying to fight or run away and go into hiding. Steve Orlando and Vincenzo Caratu are the creators here. And why the heck is Peter Parker showing up here? Does he have anything to do with the fall of X, or is he just hanging out with one of his amazing friends? Children of the Vault finally making a huge move. This was one of the most underrated reads I had in 2024. This is written by Dennis Camp, who is now writing the Ultimates. And if you missed out on this, this is awesome. It has Cable and Bishop teaming up together as they're dealing with the Children of the Vault's return, while also escaping the hands of Orchis and trying to find out why Orchis was needing Cable. What is going on inside of Cable's head that they need? It's something to do with the future. Luca Maresca is the artist through here, and it is a phenomenal... I wish that Dennis Camp could write a Cable and Bishop series. I would love the return of a Cable and Bishop series. Now here's a team we haven't heard of in a while. Alpha Flight, Divided We Stand. Canada's premier superhero team is back. This time it's Guardian, Snowbird, Puck, Shaman. They reunite as they fight Aurora, Northstar, and Nemesis. But why are they fighting these friends? Who is behind all of this? Why has Department H attempted to shut down Alpha Flight for good? It does have ties into the Fall of X storyline. Ed Brisson writing this, Scott Gillespie drawing the 5-issue miniseries. Dark X-Men, The Mercy Crown with Madeline Pryor right there, the Goblin Queen. So this is the story of Havoc, Gimmick, Azazel, Zero. Oh my gosh, and it has a return of Albert. Oh, love that character. Wolverine there, Archangel, all led by the Goblin Queen in a fight against Orchis. Because if the regular X-Men are in hiding, and they're telling all mutants to go into hiding away from Orchis, or just leave Earth, then it's up to the Dark X-Men to take them down. Steve Fox writing this series with Jonas Scharf drawing these issues. Now, we haven't talked about the old Knucklehead in a little bit. We talked about Albert. So what's he been up to? Yeah. Well, hanging out with Ghost Rider. That's right. Benjamin Percy also writing Ghost Rider. So we knew a crossover was going to happen between Wolverine and Ghost Rider. And this is Weapons of Vengeance. Are you all ready for Wolverine? Hell no, no one was. What is Wolverine? Well, find out in these pages. He gets his own miniseries later on. When blood is spilled, Johnny Blaze becomes the Ghost Rider. But what happens when Wolverine and Johnny Blaze work together to investigate the death of innocent mutants? And what is Wolverine? One way to find out. Another miniseries that I thought was an ongoing series, Jerry Duggan writing this. This is the Uncanny Avengers, The Resistance. It's the U.S. and Krakoan governments are now being attacked by Captain Krakoa. And who is this new Captain Krakoa? Captain America enlists Rogue, Psylocke, Monet, Quicksilver, and Deadpool to figure out who this new Captain Krakoa is. Javier Garon, Joshua Casara, and Emilio Lizo drawing these issues here. Everything has to do with that Hellfire Gala. That Hellfire Gala led to all of this. And mutants being hunted down. Orchis is not fooling around. Louise Simonson returns to one of her characters that she wrote in the pages of X Factor. This is Jean Grey, Flames of Fear, Bernard Chang drawing the artwork. He's the one that did the Children of the Atom. This is Jean's life. Remember I talked about her? Something's going on with her during the Hellfire Gala? Well, now it is in shambles as the Krakoan Hellfire Gala goes up in smoke. So this is a retrospective on her life and key moments in her life. And then, of course, the future of how she can help put an end to Orchis and all of this madness that is going on around her. Realm of X by my buddy Torun Grombeck. This is an unlikely group of mutants who end up finding themselves stranded in Vanaheim. So Mirage and Marrow and Dus have to find a way to work together with Magic. But Magic isn't really the problem, right? Magic has a new status quo. It is Typhoid Mary. So Magic's having her own problems. Her magic powers, or I guess her magical powers, or supernatural powers are malfunctioning. So how can the rest of these ladies help each other to get out of here and go back and fight Orchis? Because there needs to be a fight. Now, I mentioned that issue of Spider-Man for a reason, because Miss Marvel, the New Mutant, that's right, Kamala Khan is back as what? A mutant? After the shocking events of Amazing Spider-Man, she comes back during the worst time of the X-Men, when the X-Men are just shattered and mutants are just scattered around the world. She comes back as a mutant. Boy, this was a bad time to come back. Iman Villani writing this, who starred as Miss Marvel, and this is actually a solid read. Carlos Gomez and Adam Gorham are the artists in this book. This also has her first appearance in this collection. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up X-Force, because we got X-Force by Benjamin Percy, Volume 8. We talked about all these key players in the Hellfire Gala, but where the hell was X-Force? Well, this is the volume where you find out what they were doing, and how does Colossus come to the reclamations of his brother? What ends up happening to Mikhail through these pages? Domino, Black Tom Cassidy, Colossus, Mikhail, Deadpool now being a big part of this team. All of it leading into the next volume with X-Force by Benjamin Percy, Volume 9. Robert Gill and Daniel Picciotto are the artists during the finale here. So this collects, yeah, it went on for 50 issues. So X-Force finally goes up against Beast. So this is the huge showdown while mutants are trying to escape Orchis, right? They're dealing with freaking Beast. We ain't got time for this, man. We got some real threat out there. If you're a fan of Nightcrawler, oh my gosh, you are in heaven during this era, because we've had Cy Spurrier tell the story of Way of X, and then he went on to write the Legion of X storyline, and of course Sins of Sinister, and now we have the Uncanny Spider-Man Fall of X. This is the finale to Cy Spurrier's saga of Nightcrawler, and this does have a, I don't want to say retcon origin to Nightcrawler, because it is something that Chris Claremont wanted to do, and that's found in the pages of X-Men Blue Origins in here. But he couldn't do it at the time. But now, Cy Spurrier, Lee Garbett, Marcos Stowe, and Wilton Santos bring you the story that Chris Claremont had been wanting to tell. And it is found in this very trade paperback. One that is often missed in this reading order. I always like to throw this one in here just for fun, but who doesn't want to read Predator versus Wolverine? This story is crazy, taken out of continuity, of course, but it doesn't matter. It's a nice break from the Krakoa era of all the seriousness going on. We kind of need that from time to time. So yes, Predator versus Wolverine. Not necessary at all, but total fun. Wolverine by Benjamin Percy, Volume 7. So now we're back to reality. So it is Wolverine against the entire Marvel Universe, because he is, or at least he believes he is, the last mutant standing. He's going up against his friends. He's going into hiding, but he's tired of hiding. Captain America, Black Panther, Incredible Hulk, and Spider-Man all show up through here. So we have Black Panther and Spider-Man that are also going to be crossing over with the Predator. Maybe that's why I pointed that out. Juan Jose Rip and Ibrahim Mustafa doing the art here. All right, back to Iron Man. So while Fei Long continues his attacks against the rest of the mutant kind, Tony and Emma end up making a decision in this very volume right here that will unite the Avengers with the X-Men, and maybe they're helping each other out. Jerry Duggan, of course, writing these stories with Juan Frigeri and Andre DeVito and Iguara on artwork here. But we're not quite done with Jerry Duggan's Invincible Iron Man. But everything comes to an end here. This is the end of Krakoa. This is the send-off of the Krakoa era. This I found to be the hardest part to map. Because you could read the Sabretooth War, you could read Dead X-Men, but I feel like all of those are going to spoil what happens in this very, very event-driven book right here. This is Fall of House of X and Rise of Powers of X. So if there's a fall, there has to be a rise, and both of them intertwined with each other. And a huge send-off to this wonderful era. But our reading order doesn't stop here, because this is just the beginning of the end. You knew we had a fall, and a lot of these issues I'm going to be talking about happening during this event, where big things are happening. But I think reading those would spoil what happens here. So hopefully with the omnibus, they're done in reading order, like by issue, not by story arc. That would be great. Like some thought was put into it. Because reading this can get a little confusing. I got confused, and I love X-Men. I've been reading X-Men for 40 years, but I got confused. So I try to put this reading order in the best possible way that I thought would work for people reading it in collected edition. So I think it is very important to read this first. Jerry Duggan writing the stories in here with Kieran Gillen and Al Ewing. And then, of course, Lucas Wernick, R.B. Silva, Jethro Morales, and Stefano Caselli doing some of the artwork. But we also have classic artists in here like John Romita Jr. and Lionel Francis Yu, Walter Simonson coming in for this big, big event. The Sabretooth War that kicks off with Wolverine by Benjamin Percy Volume 8. Sabretooth and Wolverine finally face off against each other. It's been about 5 years since they last fought each other, and this gets brutal. As a matter of fact, I mean, there's dismemberment here. Parental advisory. There's some things in here that Benjamin Percy, Jeff Shaw, and Corey Smith with Victor Lavalle are doing that are just freaking crazy. Dismemberment of some of these beloved characters that I didn't see coming. This is Volume 8. Here we have Volume 9. How can you stand against Sabretooth? Well, hell, you got yourself adamantium, buddy. Get yourself an adamantium armor. So this big fight, is it the final fight? Probably not. We've had the final fight between Sabretooth and Wolverine for years. Still waiting. But this also features the rest of the exiles in here and what ends up happening to them. And then, of course, this big fight between Victor and Logan. Dead X-Men. Who are the Dead X-Men and why are they dead? Well, again, after the Hellfire Gala, but taking place during the fall of the House of X, Cannonball, Dazzler, Frenzy, Jubilee, and Prodigy leak across time and space to prevent the catastrophe that is the fall of the House of X. But who is leading them? Who is telling them to do this? And who will they have to face at the end that will not let them succeed in their mission? Steve Fox writing this, Bernard Chang, Vincenzo Caratu, and Javier Pina are the artists in this 4-issue miniseries. Magneto has been asleep at the wheel for a while now. Resurrection of Magneto. This is the finale of Al Ewing's run on X-Men Red. Luciano Vecchio drawing this. Storm must bring Magneto home in a fight against Orcus. She believes that he's the one that can help. But how are they going to get the Master of Magnetism, oh my gosh, look at that, to come back? And what does the deep key that we've been talking about, this deep key for a while now in X-Men Red, what does it unlock? And if Magneto comes back. Immortal X-Men coming to an end with the miniseries X-Men Forever. This is Kieran Gillen's final issue in here with Luca Maresca on artwork. So how do you end up killing a digital god? What do you do when the Phoenix ends up bleeding out into nothing? And what does it mean to be an X-Men Forever? This is a really dark story that takes place during the fall of X. And of course, features Mr. Sinister and what could be maybe his final fate. Miss Marvel Mutant Menace, Iman Vellani and Scott Goroweski, drawing the issues of Mutant Menace 1 through 4. This is Kamala Khan fighting for her home in Jersey City against Orcus. So this spoils a little bit of what happens in the Rise of X. So I didn't want to get that spoiled by this book, which is why I'm suggesting reading it now, here. A really fun book here. Oh my gosh, this is Cable United We Fall. The Neocracy is coming to our time right here. So Cable knows what's what this is going to lead to. Fabian Nicieza returns to this character, Scott Eaton and Lan Medina, and it is just a blast to go back and read Cable again. Like, the way that, to me, Fabian Nicieza's voice is Cable and Deadpool. Always has been, always will be. This is a blast from the past, but also ties in heavily with the fall of X that's going on. Avengers by Jed MacKay, Volume 3. This is Blood Hunt. What the hell? Well, the fall of X finally reaches the Avengers. Tony Stark ends up getting a new suit, drawn, that was actually designed by Pepe Larraz, but this is Jed MacKay and Francesco Mortarino. Even though it ties heavily with the issues of Blood Hunt, it does have some Fall of X stuff in here, including those Sentinels. Why the hell do those Sentinels look like Iron Man? Well, here we go with Invincible Iron Man by Jerry Duggan, Volume 3, Iron and Diamonds. This is the finale. So now with Emma and Tony making a decision, this is where they end up facing off against Fei Long in this huge clash. War Machine and Ironheart also team up to take down these Iron Man-looking Sentinels. And there is a reason why they look like Iron Man, and a lot of it has to do with Tony Stark running out of money, huh? Juan Frighetti, Chris Lee, and Patrick Searcher are the artists in this send-off to Iron Man. X-Men by Jerry Duggan, Volume 6. So here we have a lot of the loose ends being wrapped up. Pepe Larraz coming back to draw this, Javier Pina. And this is the High Evolutionary wrap-up. We still have characters like Fei Long in here. And again, ties to what's going on in the Fall of X and Rise of the Powers. And Nimrod, what is going on with him and Orcus? And are they going to finally put a stop to him? And where is Rasputin through all of this? I love that character design. Now we got one more book happening in the aftermath of everything. It really doesn't tie in that much, but I think it's a fun read after this whole event. X-Men Heir of Apocalypse. This is a good book. I liked it. I think you don't need to read it, right? But I think it's a good wrap up to everything that happened, especially with the character of Apocalypse. This is 12 mutants are chosen to compete for the honor of becoming the heir of Apocalypse, but only one can be the heir of Apocalypse. So you have characters in here like Exodus and Archangel, Mirage, Wolverine, Forge, but there's a 13th contender too. Steve Fox and Netho Diaz wrapping up some of the stuff that was in the Fall of X and Rise of X, but suggested reading after all of Krakoa. And that, as they say, is that. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. Woo! Probably the longest reading order for sure. If you're interested in purchasing some of these collected editions, don't forget to check out our sponsors. BD Cosmos, the Canadian leader in graphic novels. They have a physical storefront in Montreal, Quebec, and their website, bdcosmos.com, offers 25% off your order of over $99 or more, and free shipping everywhere in Canada for every order of $250 or more.
Their shipping care is exceptional. Your books will stay cozy through the rough Canadian weather and arrive to you in near mint condition.
After checkout, let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way, and you'll be added to the monthly $25 gift card raffle. Entries are valid for new and returning customers.
Don't be afraid to call or email them. Ask them questions. Their staff is always happy to help guide you towards the right purchase. Visit their website, bdcosmos.com, for more. BD Cosmos, with rewards and raffles taking care of customers in Canada. Eh?
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the complete, comprehensive reading order of X-Men, the Krakoa Era in collected editions. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything, or maybe don't let me know. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Again, if you want the written documentation, by all means, please check us out on Patreon. The written documentation is all there, making things easier for you. If you want to wait around for the Omnis, which I'm sure will come one day, you can wait around on the Omnis. But I wanted to make this video because people have been asking me for well over a year, and now that it's finally over, I can finally talk about it. But that's it, everybody. We are on Patreon and Spreadshop, amazing ways to support the channel. This video, I'm not going to lie, took 4 hours to shoot, just putting everything together. I still have to edit. Woo! Comics. Gotta love them. But That's it, everyone. Stay healthy and safe out there. It is my absolute pleasure to bring these back. And yes, on our Patreon is where I'm going to let people vote for the next reading order. Stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.